Om Vim Dim Kam Tam Sham Lam Vam Ram Shri Sat Guru Buddha Rawa Bhagwan Ishwara Trimurti Avatara. Welcome to this video on the Zen Warrior channel. Today we're going to talk about some scary stories. So if you're not into scary stories, this might not be a video for you. But if you like knowledge, and in this video there's also going to be knowledge about how to avoid a potential pitfall or trap. So I suggest listening on. Today's video we're going to talk about a particular phenomenon. So, as you may know, everything in society, everything represents something. Items have importance, have significance. And this is also true for rare items and spiritual items. There is one item that we will discuss in this video today. And before we start this discussion, I will tell you very clearly and honestly that you should not be tempted by the knowledge I give you in this video. You should not ever come into contact with this object or with the stories that come with it. But for the sake of pure knowledge, I share these things with you. The item we will discuss today, and the person we will discuss today, is the hoof and the bearer of the hoof. What is the hoof? Who is the bearer of the hoof? As there is a God, as God exists, there is also a part of reality, a facet of God, a twin, in a way, of God, but one that only exists within the fairy tale, within the story, not outside of it. Not as powerful as God, with all the facets of God, but a powerful facet of God that is the facet that does those things which are essential to the story, but which would not be appropriate for God to do. So a version of God does them instead and takes the blame for them instead. Isn't it convenient? And this twin of God is called the devil, Satan, right? Goes by many names. The evil side, the evil one, with his armies. The fallen one, the one who does the evil stories. So the devil does exist, just like God exists. Like other gods exist as well. Other beings, all the different levels of power and ability and knowledge. But God the Father exists, okay? The Parasiva. And the Alavam. The Mahavishnu. The Ishwara. So, the Paraishwara. So God exists and is known in many names in different cultures as the Father God of often all the other gods, or in some cultures of all the people, depending on whether it's a culture that openly recognizes other beings as gods or as different levels and names of spiritual developments. So the God exists, the devil exists, and, well, there are stories of God and there are stories of the devil. Now, God has the stories of the devil and knows the stories of the devil, and the devil does not know all the stories of God. So there are many stories. And one of these stories is that there is the hoof. So what is the hoof? The hoof is a story of the devil who grants his powers to a human being, to a deva on earth, right? The story of the devil who actually grants a part of his powers directly to that deva. As you can imagine, coming from the devil, that's most likely not free, and it's not. Okay? So what is the hoof? The hoof is an object that represents Satan, that represents the devil, and represents the devil fully. So there are different ways to define fully, but in magic and in understanding of these things and in these realms, when you get into the world of gods and angels and devil and all of that, spiritual practitioners are different levels. There are stories of the devil, and the hoof is one of the stories of the devil. So right away, to anyone that has any common sense, I told you, the devil is the bad stories, the not pleasant stories, but essential in the system, but the ones that aren't fun. So why would you go to that, right? And as you can imagine, the story of the devil always has a bad ending. You can imagine it. It's a bad story, bad ending. Good story, good ending. With difficulties maybe, but good ending. But bad story, bad ending. So the hoof is an object, and the bearer of the hoof is a person. And this is a story of Satan, a story of the devil, where an individual can create or purchase a hoof, and after doing specific rituals with it, can activate the hoof. And by activating the hoof, gets a part of the powers of the devil, of Satan. Right? Now, what happens to that person? Well, there's a lot of things that are going to happen to that person. Right? First of all, what is a hoof? A hoof is an object that represents Satan from extremity to extremity. So when you look at Satan, you know that Satan has the horns, the black horns. But he also has the black hoofs. Right? So at the top, utmost top of him, the horns. At the utmost bottom of him, the hoof. Encompassing all of him in the color black. Black horns, black hoof. But then there is an object that is associated to the story of the hoof. And my personal belief is that this object should never be sold to anyone. It should not be available for purchase. It should not be created because it's dangerous. It's in a Satan, a devil story. And this story is the hoof. And what is the hoof? The hoof is a mustache horn of a buffalo, right? And there is a specific black horn, right, of the buffalo that looks like a hoof. And because this object looks like a hoof, that black horn of the buffalo represents the horn, the top, in black, and the hoof in black, representing all of Satan, all of the full realm, the full scale, right? So this object, a buffalo hoof or horn, essentially a horn, a black horn, but that looks like a hoof, is in the stories of the devil an object that can turn someone into a bearer of a hoof. So once someone receives a hoof, one of those objects in their life, receives possession of that, if they activate that hoof with a specific ritual, a secret ritual, well, they can become a hoof, a bearer of a hoof, and they get the powers of Satan. So what powers do they get? The power to curse people, to destroy them with the power of Satan. So sometimes people might go towards the hoof if they want revenge on someone and they feel like they don't have the power to get revenge on them. But it's very foolish because it is a pact that you make with Satan, with the devil, a form of pact. Okay? This is how you make a pact. But a very serious one where you get the power. But it's interesting because what happens is you get the power of Satan when you make the pact with, and become a bearer of the hoof. But the power starts strong and slowly corrupts and dissipates over time. And by the time it's corruptly dissipated, your whole life has been totally destroyed. You have lost everything. Everyone you cared about. At the beginning, you had the power to destroy your enemies. You destroyed your enemies, and yet somehow, everything got twisted. After all, it's the power of Satan. So you make the pact, you have the power, you can hurt your enemies, you all do that, and then once you've hurt a couple enemies, well, your whole life will be destroyed even worse. Also it leads to your death, right? To your death into the pact with Satan. So a bearer of the hoof does not last very long. Okay? Once a person makes a pact with a hoof, a black buffalo horn, they have about, I would say, 3 to 4 days of considerable power. Waning down after that usually don't last more than 1 month. You're now 2 months, that's pushing it a big maximum. Before they're taken out of the story. And at the end, they have no more power and they've lost everything. So that's a hoof. It's a devil story. He or she who would seek the power of the devil, the power of Satan, the very raw power that destroys that individual. So it's a dark power that destroys, yes, your enemies, but yourself as well, and you won't last more than potentially a month, maybe less, maybe a month more. So this is the story of a hoof. A bearer of a hoof is someone who has activated a pact with a hoof, has the power of the devil, does damage in the system, and then disappears. So this is a very guarded secret, because some people, for example, might go do that even knowing this, just to get that power for those few first days, to be able to curse and get revenge on anyone. Like kamikazes were willing to sell their soul to get revenge on someone who really hurt them, for example. So that's a mistake, and they shouldn't do that. Basically what you should know about devil stories, Satan stories, is that you should stay away from those stories as much as possible. You'll encounter them in your life and process them, and you control how you process your stories and your knowledge and your information and your mind and your mental state and the vibration that you hold and keep. And you'll encounter some, in some unfortunate circumstances, or some that's not the end of the world. They do their thing. But my recommendation is stay away from all devil stories. Stay away from going to Satan, all these different things. This is the bad side of God. Go to the good side if you want good things. If you want bad things, you can't do it from yourself. Well, there's a reason you can't do it from yourself. It's because you probably haven't shown responsibility in the system and grown as a spiritual being yet. So you don't go to devil stories. You stay away from devil stories, and you hope that none of them ever touch your life, because they're really unfortunate and they're not fun. But if you have to encounter them, you deal with what you got to deal with, right? So that's the story of a hoof. Okay, it's a Satan story, a devil story of Satan that takes an individual and fully gives them the power, and then takes their soul, takes them, and destroys everything for them. So this is the kind of pact that often someone who seeks ultimate power for revenge will take. At that last moment when they decide that revenge is more important for them than their own soul. And that's a very scary thing, because everyone should try to protect their own soul, right? So this is the story of a hoof. The story of the devil, the story of Satan, how through an object and an object story, this is a rare item. You don't very often see this type of item, but you can find this type of item, and you can become a hoof. So you should never even handle this type of item, because what if the item was already started or something like that, and then you potentially finalize the work on the item for the pact without even knowing what you're doing. So it's an item that should be handled with care as well. You don't want to inadvertently do the things that activate it, because remember that the ritual to do it is not so complex, because Satan wants to work through the world and wants to have more than one hoof as well working at the same time, because what the hoof doesn't understand is that the hoof gets their couple days of hurting their enemies that they wanted to hurt, but then the magic that's coming out through of them is basically Satan doing Satan's work and destroying everything in the community and all that. So a hoof is very scary, because it brings the influence of Satan into a community, and it does damage in that community and those people, and destroys everything and all that. So it's basically evil, evil. And that's why it's a responsibility for people not to handle those things. And even when you look around now, you can find those things for sale in places, so you have to watch out, because whether the people selling them know about these things or not, and many of them do actually. You have to be careful when you handle items of power, items you don't understand, things you don't understand, you know. Black buffalo horn, which also represents the hoof, the bottom, and the shape that it takes in some of them, right? So you have to be very careful in these things, and careful what you handle as a spiritual practitioner as an item. You know, when someone hands you something, you get into a place, you know, you encounter other spiritual practitioners potentially, you see things around, you know, things have different meanings, and you know, sometimes it's better not to adventure into some fields, you know. So this is the story of the hoof, the story of a devil's story, right? How through an object one can make a pact and get the powers of the devil and have them for a couple days until it destroys them and everything that they care about, right? And this is the story of how the devil, one of the stories of how the devil influences the world and seeks to destroy people and cause ruckus and damage, you know, one of the destructive forces at work in creation. So do not go to devil stories. Do not approach those stories. Stay away from that. Remember to take the story of God and the armies of God always, and understand that the devil falls under God also. So the devil, if you're right with God, well, the devil doesn't have any power over you. You know, it's when you're no longer right with God and you've gone to the devil, made deals, pacts, you know, because the devil doesn't have any ability to take you from God if God doesn't judge you in your final judgment, you know. So if you go make a pact with the devil, now it's different. Now you have obligations, right? Or at least that's how the story goes. So people seek to make pacts with the devil, understanding that that might give them some kind of power or ability to hurt someone or do something, or but the devil doesn't love you. The devil, the Satan, is a scary force that is not a loving force, if you understand what I'm saying. Okay, it's one that seeks to destroy. Okay, so in that context, you should understand that you shouldn't mess around with things that you don't fully understand. And everybody understands the different levels of ability. And when you understand enough about Satan and the devil, you don't worry about those things anymore, but you don't particularly feel like engaging with them either. Shuddy! Debug one.